and welcome to my video series covering the story arcs of Star Wars The Clone Wars. In this video, we will be covering the very first chronological story arc, the 3-part Battle of Christophsis. Please note, there will be spoilers for The Dark Disciple novel, Star Wars Rebels, and Star Wars Ahsoka. Cat and Mouse acts as a prequel to all the episodes that were released before and after it. The episode follows the space side of the Christophsis Conflict, where the CIS are blockading the planet, preventing the Republic being able to provide aid to Senator Organa on the planet's surface. The CIS have a ruthless admiral called Trench, who has history with Admiral Larsen and was presumed dead. Obi-Wan suggests Anakin use a new acquired stealth ship to sneak past Trench to reach the surface. Though Anakin decides to use the stealth ship to try and attack Trench directly, but is thwarted by Trench's thermal shields. Anakin analyzes Trench's previous victories and uses his tactics against him, using Trench's own tracking torpedoes that require him to lower his own shields, allowing Anakin to attack his command bridge. Before Trench is able to re-enable the shields, the torpedoes make impact and Trench is defeated. While Obi-Wan commences an attack on the surrounding fleet, Anakin lands on Christophsis, providing Senator Organa with the aid he requested. The Hidden Enemy is the second episode of this story arc. Anakin and Obi-Wan are in 2 towers, ready to ambush some droids, when all of a sudden the droids seem to be aware of their tactics and attack both the towers at once. Having to evacuate the site, the Jedi and clones escape the towers via LAAT. Captain Rex and Commander Cody analyze a recovered tactical droid's head for information. Meanwhile, Anakin and Obi-Wan decide to travel to the Separatist base. Rex and Cody notice that one of the clones have left an active comlink in their command center. Figuring out that it comes from Slick's barracks, they inquire his men one by one until they discover the real culprit is Slick himself. Slick, in retaliation, blows up the Republic supplies before heading to the command center. Anakin and Obi-Wan arrive at the Separatist base, where they encounter Asajj Ventress, who they are familiar with. Battling throughout the base, Ventress eventually leaves the Jedi to enact the next part of her master's plan, but not before sending General Loathsome to deal with the Republic's forces. Rex and Cody return to the command center and act coy to lure out Slick. This works when Slick attempts to shoot them with one of their blasters, only to discover it's not loaded. Slick exclaims that Ventress offered him money and freedom before Cody knocks him unconscious. Being presented to the Jedi, Slick retorts that the Jedi have enslaved his brothers and that his actions were all for them. While most of their ammunitions were destroyed, they thankfully still have their heavy cannons intact. The Clone Wars movie begins, opening the final part of this story arc with the upcoming conflict that was set up in the Hidden Enemy, with Obi-Wan, Anakin and the clones gaining a quick yet short-lived victory. However, General Loathsome will soon return with more reinforcements, while the Jedi are down to their last few clones. A shuttle arrives with the Jedi thinking it's reinforcements, only for them to realise it's a Padawan learner called Ahsoka Tano. The 2 Jedi, thinking that this is Obi-Wan's new Padawan, are corrected by her when she states that Yoda has assigned her to Master Skywalker. Having to get back to the battle at hand, Ahsoka is quickly brought up to speed by Captain Rex. Obi-Wan and Anakin devise a plan. Obi-Wan is to distract General Loathsome by faking a surrender, while Anakin and Ahsoka are to reach inside Loathsome's energy field and destroy it from within. After the battle, Anakin reprimands Ahsoka for her recklessness, but states there is hope for her if she was to become his Padawan. An LAAT arrives to pick up Anakin and Ahsoka as they prepare to regroup. The 3 episodes in production order are CW-118, The New Padawan, CW-201, The Hidden Enemy, and CW-217, Cat and Mouse. This shows how the story arc was produced back to front, with it initially being a 1-episode prequel to the next story arc, before they added 2 additional prequel episodes within the second production season. As with every episode in the original production of The Clone Wars, the story arc would have been executive produced by George Lucas, while Dave Filoni was the supervising director. The New Padawan, being a part of the Clone Wars movie, was written by Henry Gilroy, Scott Murphy, and Stephen Melching, while it was directed by Dave Filoni and produced by Catherine Winder. The Hidden Enemy was written by Drew Z. Greenberg, was directed by Steward Lee, and produced by Cary Silver. Cat and Mouse was written by Brian Larsen, with Drew Z. Greenberg acting as supervising writer. The episode was directed by Kyle Dunlevy, and like The Hidden Enemy, was also produced by Cary Silver. The new Padawan was released on August 15, 2008 as part of the Clone Wars movie, while The Hidden Enemy debuted on February 6, 2009 on Cartoon Network as Season 1, Episode 16. Cat and Mouse aired just over a year later on March 20th, 2010 as Season 2, Episode 16. A wise leader knows when to follow. Here is a story conference session sketch for Cat and Mouse, created by Dave Filoni, as shown on the Clone Wars Season 2 Blu-ray release. There are also early designs of Trench, showing him look less like a spider and more Squidward-esque, though in this, we can already see his spider-esque emblem design take form. By the time Trench was actually designed within the production itself, however, he had pretty much gained his final spider-esque look we see in the finished episode. The design of the clone stealth pilot shows an earlier style of asset sheet that Lucasfilm Animation used within the first 2 seasons, without the white asset label. Though as seen earlier with the Trench design, by the time of this production episode, it seems they were transitioning between the 2 types. The clone stealth pilot makes their only appearance in the show within this episode, though had they reappeared within an unfinished arc, they would have no doubt been redesigned not only to fit the Phase 2 clone armor design, but to also be up to date with the evolved animation technology they had by the time of those later unfinished seasons. Here are some of the designs for the stealth ship created by Russell Chong, showing both its exterior scale and its unique interior. These designs placed the design phase of Cat and Mouse around fall/autumn 2008, with there also being design revisions done later in the development pipeline in 2009. The side profile design of Admiral Trench is actually featured within the episode itself, when Yularen checks to see if his suspicions of their enemy being Trench are correct, though interestingly, this specific side profile of him with his colours is not included on his design sheet on the Blu-ray, so it essentially gives us a cropped look at another version of his design sheet, not publicly released. An early production name for Trench was Admiral Taranch, a more clear reference to his spider-like appearance. This name, however, is kept within the final episode within the scene where Yularen discovers Trench is their enemy, with Taranch being written in Aurebesh on his data screen. This is most likely an animation oversight. The Dreadnought article from Wikipedia was copied, translated into Aurebesh, and used in the Dreadnought visuals on the data screens within this episode. Something cut from the episode itself, but present in the script, was the name of the Jedi individual in charge of the Republic Task Force at the Battle of Malastare, this being a Jedi called Kep Shi. Kep Shi being the individual to seemingly defeat Trench initially before his reveal of still being alive. While Kep Shi still seems to be counted as canon despite having their name reference cut, they have not appeared in any material since, making it possible that in the future they could tell the story of Trench's initial defeat, but change the details so it's not Jedi Kep Shi. A scene not present in the final episode, but presented in the 10th voice proxy reel animation format on the Blu-ray release, features Anakin and Yularen on the bridge of their Venator, ordering the clone officers about. A funny thing to note here is that Dave Filoni is the 10th voice for Anakin, a role he'd take for many characters during this early stage of an episode's development, before they hired and booked the actual voice actors to record a character's lines of dialogue. It was George Lucas's idea to have a ship that size have a cloaking device, which was something Dave Filoni and the animation team questioned, considering in The Empire Strikes Back there is that one line of dialogue that states small ships can't have them. Lucas's response to this was, well, this one has a cloaking device. This is why they added a line of dialogue in the episode itself where Anakin states that something that small usually doesn't have one. Obi-Wan's conversation with Bail Organa mirrors Leia Organa's hologram message from A New Hope. Admiral Trench was presumed dead at the end of Cat and Mouse, and all the way until the premiere episode of The Lost Missions, The Unknown, where it was revealed he survived a blip with cybernetics, being one of the characters who hint towards Anakin's future. The Unknown was initially planned as the opening to a full 22-episode 6th season before the show's cancellation led to only the first half of the season being finished. Admiral Trench was also to be the villain of the premiere arc of a full 20-episode 7th season, but these episodes were cancelled in March 2013 before production could be completed. However, when The Clone Wars was revived for a short 12-episode final season to be released in 2020, these 4 episodes were completed and Trench became one of the villains in the final season, in which none of the 3 major villains of the show as a whole had any involvement in beyond brief cameos from General Grievous and Darth Sidious. Based on this information, and how Cat and Mouse has him presumed vaporized, it seems Trench has a knack for surviving seemingly fatal situations, something which would become unfortunately a lot more common within the Star Wars universe in recent years. This episode marks the earliest chronological on-screen appearance of Admiral Larsen, whom Filoni on the Clone Wars movie commentary said that people initially mistook for Tarkin. Filoni also states that they thought it would be fun to have a younger version of Larsen, who was originally a background character on the Death Star in A New Hope, be featured within the Clone Wars and show him, quote, ride Anakin's coattails up the Republic and Imperial rank ladder. Due to the mid-production cancellation of Star Wars The Clone Wars in March 2013, Cat and Mouse is, as of the making of this video, the last time that Christophsis was used in an animated Star Wars production. Truth enlightens the mind, but won't always bring happiness to your heart. As Lucasfilm Animation began to develop what would become the latter half of Season 1, George Lucas suggested an idea about what if a clone goes bad. This idea ultimately became the hidden enemy. Within the script, the initial sequence in the episode was to have the clones set up their own droid that looks similar to a Dalek from Doctor Who. However, it was decided to drop this aspect of the episode to make it more clear that it's clones versus droids, instead of clones using droids versus droids, as it was deemed as an unnecessary complication to the story. This droid was to be called the Beast, and also have some similarity to the LIN V8K mining droid from A New Hope. Obi-Wan, according to the script, is somehow both on the 287th floor and the 46th level of his tower. Dave Filoni describes traitorous clones as going a bit Django. Production-wise, this episode allowed the team to revisit Christophsis and expand upon it, with George Lucas wanting to see the Republic's actual base on the planet. The base, however, grew bigger as the episode went through its production. Originally only being 2 barracks, it evolved into 8 separate barracks, a command center, a mess hall, and a power generator, complete with a wall around the base's exterior. The command center reuses the same overall base design from CW125 Trespass to show how the Republic have a specific design aesthetic, which also doubles as an efficient reuse of animation assets. The mess hall was designed after the dining area of Big Rock Ranch, something that artist Killian Plunkett says he threw in, and it somehow made it all the way through production. Killian also states that the majority of work on this episode was location-based, considering most of the characters are existing ones. As seen in the proxy animation footage, considering all the clones share a base model, the production team have to put labels on them to know who is who, and while we have outliers like Rex and Cody, we also have labels for some of the lesser noticeable ones that are named later in the episode, including Chopper, Slick, and Jester. There are other clone troopers with the names Cam, Punch, and Gus. Unfortunately, Cam gets shot and killed by the tactical droid, but Gus avenges him by being the one to steal the tactical droid's head. Unknown clones are simply referred to as clean, with their helmets having an boost face tag. Within the reel is a brief scene not included within the final episode, showing Anakin and Obi-Wan huddled inside the elevator with their clone forces, with a dialogue exchange between Anakin and Obi-Wan of, "This isn't going very well," and "No, it's not." Dave Filoni again acts as the temp voice for Anakin within these, something as previously stated he also did for the latter produced CW217 Cat and Mouse. Killian Plunkett describes the hidden enemy as a prequel to a prequel of a prequel, and there's gonna be another prequel. This statement of course hinting towards the at the making of the Season 1 Blu-ray documentary, the upcoming CW217 Cat and Mouse episode. Slick was originally planned to have red hair, but the standard black hair was used for him when he was rendered, thus making him actually blend in more with the other clone suspects. The tactical droid head has, if you couldn't guess, the word tactical written in Aurebesh on its side. Due to last-minute alterations, Obi-Wan refers to Cody as both Captain and Commander. This is due to the former originally intended to be Obi-Wan speaking to Rex. A new variant of the speeder music from Attack of the Clones is used when Cody and Rex apprehend Slick. Clone pilot Hawk, who was originally featured in a removed sequence from a Clone Wars movie, returns in this prequel episode. Clone Trooper Sketch has the Aurebesh equivalent of an S tattooed above his left eye. While this episode features a clone named Chopper who will not appear again within the show, that name will become more well known for the C-Series astromech droid C-110P, who is a main character in Star Wars Rebels. While it's assumed that the Jedi being familiar with Ventress during the original airing of The Hidden Enemy is down to her appearance in the 2003 Clone Wars Micro Show and the Expanded Universe comics, due to the 2014 canon reset, this is now Ventress's first chronological canon appearance on screen. The Hidden Enemy is a more direct prequel to the Clone Wars movie than Cat and Mouse is, having more direct references to it, such as including a cameo from General Larsen and setting up Ventress's kidnapping of Rotta the Hutt. The Hidden Enemy, alongside the rest of the Clone Wars Season 1, had webcomics created to tie into its episode, this episode 1 being called The Clone Wars Shadowed. Christophsis was planned to reappear in the 8th and final season of the Clone Wars in the episode titled The Path, though this episode wasn't finished when the show was cancelled mid-production in March 2013, with the episode itself unfortunately never entering into production and only making it to draft script stage. Christophsis' appearance within the story of the Path episode was retained when the episode's story was adapted as the final part of the Dark Disciple novel in 2015. This was to mirror Ventress's first chronological appearance in the show with the Hidden Enemy, with her last appearance in the Clone Wars, where she is slain by Dooku on Christophsis after she would give her life to prevent him from killing Quinlan Vos, whom she had fallen in love with after the Jedi Council made them team up to try and assassinate Dooku. While this was planned as the end to her character arc in 2012, when those episodes would have been scripted, she has since been resurrected post-Clone Wars and made an appearance in The Bad Batch that aligns with her character growth featured within the unfinished story arc turned novel. How she was resurrected is yet to be explained, but has been promised to be featured in quote, future stories. Hopefully they do her justice and we get a unique story of someone who is able to come back from sacrificing themselves for someone else, a common theme in Star Wars as previously seen with the likes of Vader and Kanan. Clone X seen in The Bad Batch Season 2, while not confirmed to be Slick, could have possibly been him, with him knowing Rex and potentially having a grudge against him and the other clones after he was arrested. A few shots of Christophsis citizens is seen in the newsreel. This specific character model was used for a few renders created for the Christophsis citizens. I assume had Season 8 CW708 The Path been completed, that we would have seen more of Christophsis citizens within the second Battle of Christophsis, considering by the time that episode would have been completed, the animation technology would have improved from not just the time this story arc was created, but also compared to the likes of the Season 5 episodes. The end of the episode has Ventress reveal that the upcoming battle featured within the final part of the arc is a delaying tactic so she can execute the next part of her master's plan. The third and final part of this story arc was the first part to be released, but is the last chronologically. Initially planned as a prequel/flashback episode like the previous two, it was later decided that this would be the first out of the 4 episodes that were combined into the Clone Wars movie. The original title for this episode before it was a part of the movie, if you haven't noticed already, was The New Padawan. The New Padawan likely had a unique fortune cookie that was ultimately replaced with the well-known Star Wars go-to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, when it became the opening 25-ish minutes of the Clone Wars movie. The opening newsreels for the Clone Wars were created as a homage to classic cartoons, as well as being there to remind the viewer of important information or to inform someone of important plot points they may have missed if they didn't watch a previous episode. While not confirmed where in Season 1 this episode was to be placed, I would not be surprised if it would have ended up taking the Hidden Enemy slot, potentially pushing that episode to the second release season and maybe even pushing Cat and Mouse to Season 3. Due to being combined with the production episodes CW101, CW103, and CW104 to form the Clone Wars movie, scenes involving the Teth plot from CW101, Castle of Deception, had been re-edited to be in between the scenes focusing on the Christophsis battle. Catherine Winder states on the movie Blu-ray release that they initially did a pass of the Christophsis battle sequence, but it didn't contain enough characters, so they layered more and more into it, which required them to add an extra 20 animators to the project. The sequence of showing the Separatist shield was moved to earlier in the runtime than initially planned, to show the viewer earlier what the threat is that the heroes are facing. A lot of time was spent to make sure the look of the Separatist shield was just right, and how exactly it would work within the environment. There are 2 brief deleted scenes for this part of the Clone Wars movie that are fully voiced and animated. First, during the sequence where Anakin and Ahsoka are hiding under the box to get within the Separatist shields, where they have to avoid snail tanks, and then another brief scene with Obi-Wan instructing the clones to stay inside while the shield passes over them. While these only amount to roughly 50 seconds of additional screen time, I can see these having been removed at a point where the episodes were decided to be turned into a movie, as very few Clone Wars deleted scenes make it as far in development as these 2 did. The production team agreed that the box sequence worked better being cut down. They showed it to George Lucas and he didn't even miss the parts they cut out. While the plan of using a box to sneak past the droids isn't Anakin's finest hour, this sequence was to show how the standard battle droids aren't that intelligent. They don't see life forms, so they ignore the box. While cameoing at the end of The Hidden Enemy, the new Padawan is the only part of the Clone Wars to feature General Larsen in a speaking role. George Lucas wanted a partial Scottish accent for General Larsen, with Catherine Winder stating that it differentiates him from the others. General Larsen's design was inspired by some older Doug Chang artwork of what was a concept design for the Nemoidians. This is part of a practice of where Lucas would give the Lucasfilm animation team old unused designs and made repurpose them into new characters, vehicles or locations. Another reused design is of what Filoni calls retail droids that Ahsoka accidentally activates just before they destroy the energy shield. These were originally an early design candidate for the droideka. This sequence itself being described by Catherine Winder as an example of what George Lucas would tell them to do to keep upping the challenge presented to the heroes within the scripts. There is a deliberate focus put on clones within the new Padawan being injured, killed, and having other clones call for a medic, to drive the point home that unlike the droids, these are living soldiers. The "whose side are you on anyway" line from Anakin was one of the things during Filoni's directorial editorial phase where they tweak the character interactions. If you listen closely to the intro theme music for any episode that was released within the show, that was also produced before this one, which includes the following story arcs: The Lost Droid, The Malevolence, and Nute Gunray's Getaway, as well as single episodes Ambush, Cargo of Doom, Rookies, Storm over Ryloth, Dooku Captured, and Innocence of Ryloth. You will notice that the theme music sounds quite different. It seems that for the new Padawan, that was the 18th overall episode to be produced, and thus for the movie itself, that they recreated the theme music with a live orchestra, as seen on the new score documentary on the Clone Wars movie Blu-ray release. The movie version of the theme was then mixed slightly differently for use as the standard for every episode produced after the new Padawan, though the original version did make a brief comeback in the twinned production version of the Bad Batch Arcs episode of the same name, though this was only used in the end credits. This original version used for the intro in the first 17 production episodes sounds more digitized, and I find it interesting that they didn't retroactively go back and replace that version of the theme tune for those episodes before they aired, which means that even one of the episodes in season 2 has the earlier version of the theme tune in its intro, which aired over a year after the more well-known version of the Clone Wars theme was first heard within the Clone Wars movie release. Interestingly enough though, they did seem to update the theme tune used in the credits for some of those earlier produced episodes, making that Twins 101 production episode essentially mirror them, most likely meaning it was a deliberate callback to that original practice. Catherine Winder states Kevin Kiner was chosen because he was able to handle the variety of music that they would need for the Clone Wars series. While not everyone on the Clone Wars production got to meet George Lucas, Kevin Kiner was one who did. Before Kevin Kiner came onto the project, however, they would have a temp musical score that is created from bits of existing pieces of music from earlier movies. This is something that would continue to happen throughout the show's production. Lucasfilm went to Prague and hired a 90-piece orchestra to record the score for the movie. The battle sequences are represented by pieces of music that sound like there's a battle going on within the music itself. Kevin created a new theme for Ahsoka, considering she's a new character within this production, with Ahsoka's theme nowadays probably being more recognised by the version of it we have when she leaves the Jedi Order. George Lucas wanted distinct musical themes for all the different environments we would encounter throughout the Clone Wars show. For Christophsis, Catherine Winder states that they used a Nordic-type sound. One of Dave Filoni's favourite aspects of the Clone Wars was getting to introduce new characters. This was reflected when Disney Plus wanted more Clone Wars. With Dave Filoni only being given a limited amount of episodes, he decided to use them to focus on the two prominent new characters that were featured within the Clone Wars movie, Ahsoka and Rex. Filoni states that Ahsoka was kind of in the middle of Anakin and Obi-Wan, being brash like Anakin, but with some old guard training like Obi-Wan. In a way, she's the audience surrogate, learning to be a Jedi during this time of war at the same time the audience is learning what the Clone Wars is, with her also being the first major female Jedi character depicted on screen. George Lucas was the one who came up with the idea for Ahsoka and Anakin to use nicknames for each other. Ahsoka continuously gets annoyed when everyone calls her a youngling because of how proud she is of finally reaching her Padawan status. To show that Ahsoka is still only a 14-year-old Padawan, they depicted her getting a bit tired and cranky after doing a lot of crawling in the box, though this ends up getting both her and Anakin into an altercation with a droideka when they stand up. By this point, the Jedi have gotten used to the droideka's tactics and are able to trick it to turn off its shield by running away. Ahsoka Tano, as we all know, and who Catherine Winder rightly predicted, would go on to become a fan favourite character within the Star Wars franchise, appearing across multiple shows, getting her own original novel story in 2016, as well as her own live-action show in 2023, starring Rosario Dawson. Captain Rex would also become a fan favourite clone, even surpassing the likes of Cody for some people, and would essentially become the main character used to represent the clones when featuring in other shows, like The Bad Batch and Star Wars Rebels. Ahsoka's outranking conversation is referenced in the Star Wars Rebels Season 2 finale, Twilight of the Apprentice, currently being the last known time that she interacts with Rex within the canon timeline. Due to the mid-production cancellation of Star Wars The Clone Wars in March 2013, the new Padawan is, as of the making of this video, the last time chronologically that we have seen Christophsis on screen. This is a section of the video where I will be focusing on a specific Glup Shitto featured in the story arc, and discuss what either we know happened to them or what could have happened to them. Some arcs might not have one of these if I can't find a character who would be worthy enough. The very first one of these is none other than General Worm Loathsome. General Loathsome is the first of many early Clone Wars villains who would not properly reappear again, though he did have a cameo on a screen during Season 5's The Jedi Who Knew Too Much, showing that he was still in Republic custody by early 19 BBY after being arrested at the end of this story arc. I have a theory that Loathsome was somehow no longer in Republic custody after this, potentially being the individual who Dooku has a vendetta against during the second Battle of Christophsis. It's possible that the Republic freed Loathsome from custody, with him promising to help them fight against Dooku's second attack on the planet, with him most likely knowing tactics they could utilise, having worked with Dooku beforehand, and by 19 BBY, the Republic and Jedi are shown to be more willing to bend the rules to end the war. This would be like how it seems based on the Dave Filoni sketches from the Sith Shrine arc that the Jedi freed Poggle the Lesser from custody to help them with something within that story. The second half of the Dark Disciple novel, adapted from the unfinished original plans for an 8th season of the Clone Wars, has General Grievous, quote, settle Dooku's scores on Christophsis, with it seeming that a big battle sequence was planned for this that was unfortunately cut from the novel adaptation. It's possible that we'd have seen, like with Hondo and Grievous in Season 5, a direct follow-up to the outcome of the Battle of Christophsis, with Dooku blaming Loathsome for losing the planet. I could even see Grievous execute Loathsome like he did with Indente in the unfinished Crystal Crisis arc. This story is an interesting opening to the Clone Wars as a whole. We get to see Anakin meet and work with Admiral Larsen for the first time. His interaction with Ventress, who he already has built a hatred towards, as well as get to see him put into an unexpected position when he has a new Padawan thrust upon him. The interior design of the stealth ship reminds me of the interior design that Cad Bane's unfinished bounty hunter arc Starfighter, the Justifier, would have had, with the instrument and lighting panels sharing the same generic design, which makes sense considering both were designed by Russell Chong. The scene of the hyena bombers getting closer and closer to the stealth ship gives the feel as if the characters are underwater and scanning their deep sea surroundings, this being inspired by World War II submarine warfare. Christophsis from orbit reminds me of shattered glass, which mirrors the crystalline architecture the planet has. The planet's unique design makes me hope we'll get to see it animated on screen again at some point in the future, to see how different it can look now compared to the early days of the Clone Wars. This is something we would have been able to do had its planned Season 8 appearance been finished. Anakin's risky, potentially reckless tactics in Cat and Mouse mirror Ahsoka's in the new Padawan. Difference is that Anakin is put into Obi-Wan's shoes for the latter, which could have internally made him realise what it feels like to be Obi-Wan every time he has a plan that has a huge risk. Admiral Trench is an interesting villain. Not only does he have a unique design not usually seen within Separatist leaders, but he is also a cunning foe already being informed on cloaking ships, as well as showing the active ability to decipher his enemies' plans from their actions. Putting him up against any Jedi other than Anakin, who is very unorthodox, would not have had nearly the same effect. Despite this, however, Trench's defeat shows his weakness, where his goal of trying to best Anakin at his own game backfired when he lowered his own defences, showing him getting caught up in the moment. In terms of Ahsoka, her introduction episode is a vital piece of her character journey, as it's literally where it all began, and it's the starting point of where she was set to grow from, and I personally like getting to see that. I don't see her as annoying like some people do. I see her as an ambitious yet inexperienced character who wants to prove to her peers that she can get things done. The moment between her and Anakin after their first battle together never gets old to me. While it has Ahsoka retrospectively realise her recklessness and shortcomings, it's always a very touching sequence that shows the bond the two will have throughout the entire show. This scene, according to Filoni, didn't even exist in the draft scripts. Filoni added it afterwards to define the moment where Anakin and Ahsoka come together as Master and Padawan, with it originally being planned to be the end of the new Padawan in its episodic form. This is a perfect example of how things don't just stay exactly as their draft scripts dictate when they're actually produced, and no doubt this will be the case for those 40 unfinished Clone Wars episodes if they are ever finished. As Ventress is my favourite character within this show, I probably have a biased preference for the hidden enemy out of the 3 episodes due to her inclusion, with the additional focus on the clones being an extra additional thing for me to like about the episode. Getting to see them interact separately from the Jedi for the first time chronologically, something we know would only continue and become a bigger part of the show as its seasons went on. With the hidden enemy itself being the first chronological episode to touch on the topic of the morality of the Jedi and the Republic to use these life forms to fight their war, with Slick himself going as far as to say that the Jedi are enslaving him and his brothers. This is an aspect of the clones that would have been talked about more within the unfinished Clone Wars arcs, with it being brought up again in what was meant to be the 3rd episode of Dark Disciple, CW615, Conspirators, and something that would have most likely been further touched on in the unfinished 8th season Rex and R2 arc, written by Brent Friedman. This is something that in my opinion makes sense to be touched on, considering how the Clone Wars decided to make the clones stand out and be more individual, something I personally like, as it shows how different they are from the Separatist battle droids, as well as allow them to be characters in their own right, and not just obedient drones that follow every order. And while Slick said that the Jedi enslaved the clones, it's also the Jedi who encouraged them to promote their individuality, something that we'll see more of in later story arcs. Dave Filoni already has Order 66 in his mind when they created the development featurette for the hidden enemy, this most likely being before they started development on the production Season 5 inhibitor chip story arc, considering the Blu-ray's release of November 2009. This no doubt being something that was in the back of their minds throughout the entire show's production, eventually leading to them answering the question of how these clones could execute Order 66. As this is Ventress's now first on-screen appearance in the current continuity, I would love to get some of her pre-Clone Wars story animated on screen in the future. As for Captain Rex, it is clear to me that he has yet to be fully established separately from the other clones, with his early role being the more standard clone leader type, though this did have the added benefit of him getting to work with Cody, something the show would distance itself from relatively quickly as it focused on other character dynamics. However, there is already hints of Anakin's personality affecting him and his actions. By this point in the war, the clones are already fully aware of Anakin's tactics. This, alongside the pre-established dynamics between characters previously mentioned, shows that while this is the start of the Clone Wars show, the war in-universe has already been going on for some time. Kevin kinda hoped that he could become the next John Williams when creating the initial music for the Clone Wars, and I think all these years later, with all the different animated projects he has scored, that at least with my ears, he has succeeded in that goal, with him and his family creating pieces of music that are as iconic to me on the same level as my favourite John Williams Star Wars pieces. While Kevin wanted to become the next John, he also knew he wasn't John, instead making a homage to him by bringing their two sounds together. Something in retrospective really makes the music within the Clone Wars a standout aspect of the show, even if you can't necessarily remember every single piece of music within it off of the top of your head. The Battle of Christophsis lays a solid ground layer for the show to build on, and while it wasn't the first story arc created production-wise, it is still something that not only this show benefited from long-term, but also the storytelling of Star Wars TV as a whole. While some people regard specific Clone Wars arcs as filler and not important, I personally feel like every single one has a purpose to exist, whether that's to show the vastness of the galaxy or whether it's a very important part of a specific character's story. I now have an active channel membership available. This will grant you exclusive perks like emojis in the comments, usernames listed in my outros, and updates to what's coming next posted exclusively for members in the community tab. But the best feature is you get 5 days early access to new videos, and you will be supporting me at the same time. To find out more, you can click the join button on my channel page. Thank you to anyone who considers becoming a channel member. Thank you for watching. Please see the video description below for interesting links, sources and credits. And if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and comment. Until the next time, goodbye.